Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our recorded Facebook Live. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but we are here. We're excited. And we are colorful. We are a group of Christian African-American therapists, counselors, and educators. And we're going to do a discussion tonight. We're going to talk about safe care. There's a lot going on in our country and our world. But to get started, we want to introduce ourselves to you. So I will start. My name is Dr. Valencia Wiggins. I'm a psychologist and an educator, and I am excited to be here with this group of beautiful women. And we're just going to go around the circle. So we will go to Roslyn Jordan.
Okay, hi, I'm Roslyn Jordan, and I am a licensed professional counselor and happy to be here tonight.
Next is Shanya Gray.
Hi, everyone. My name is Shanya Gray. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor, have been in the profession now for about 13 years, and I'm also an educator and I'm assistant professor at Moraine Valley Community College.
All right. Dr. Hendrickson.
Hi, I'm Dr. Hendrickson, and I am an educator. I am an assistant professor at M.Div Bible Institute.
And this Roslyn Bates.
Hello, everyone. I'm Roslyn Bates. I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. I have 15 years of experience in the field, and I'm also a staff pastor.
All right, ladies. So, first of all, let's just start. How are y'all doing? How are we doing in this strange time, in this pandemic, on day 5,424 of sheltering in place?
Has it been that long?
I think so.
It sure feels like it, right?
I know.
Yeah,
I mean, just trying to take it one day at a time, you know, not thinking about how long this could go on, just one day at a time, being thankful that we're safe and healthy, and that's pretty much it for us.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what week it is. We've been in here for a while, and I've done pretty good for most part. You know, there was a week there where I found myself getting a bit weary, but I kind of joke a little bit and say, hey, this is an introvert's world right now. And so I am making the best of the time, but just grateful that, you know, we're safe and just making the best of it, trying to repurpose the time as much as we can, as much as I can. Yeah. So, yeah.
How about you, Roslyn?
I've been leaning into the time of rest.
Yeah.
I look at it as a time of renewal in some ways, and just reframing it in that way so that I can maximize the space that it's giving me in my life.
Dr. Hendrickson.
I've been doing well. I have to admit, I oscillate between, you know, doing well, and then there's some days I don't want to see my husband blink. I love him, and I love my 14-year-old, but when you are, you know, when your options are limited, sometimes you have to find your own space in the house.
Yeah.
But I have been really having some precious time with my teenage daughter, but also with the Lord and kind of what he's trying to tell me through this whole thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've been doing good. Actually, when this first started and how much stuff came off my plate, I was kind of excited because I was going to get to do some other things that I wanted to do. So, like you have leaned into the time. I've actually enjoyed it. I've been okay, but this week I'm feeling a little bit tired, getting a little bit weary, you know, with this. But I think that's to be expected. So as we were thinking about this time, what are some of the things that we are seeing, what this brings on in our communities, in our churches, in our homes, in our families? What are we seeing?
Well, I mean, as I work with students at the college and have been talking to different people, you know, there's students, for example, they've had difficulties transitioning to being online. You know, a lot of people are now working remote. People who used or had been very good at the computer before, had to learn a lot. It was a high learning curve for a lot of people. I mean, it's hard when there is uncertainty and you feel like you have no control. So there's a lot of anxiety around that. You know, people are anxious, not sure what to expect. So that's kind of a lot of what I've been seeing, is a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear in a lot of ways, people not quite sure what will happen, what tomorrow will bring.
Yeah. I would echo that in terms of students. I've talked to quite a bit of my students, not just academically, but what they're going through personally. And one of the things that I didn't anticipate was that they are going back into spaces that bring them back to a certain place in their life, right? When you're in college, or you're actually growing, you're a specific type of person, but then you go back into your family systems, and that can, you can revert back to a lot of things, and you have to deal with a lot of things because your role suddenly changes and without notice, right? It's one thing if you know you're going on Christmas break and you can prep yourself, or but when you have to just do this transition without any thought, there, what Shanya said, there's a lot of anxiety that happens, and that anxiety oftentimes can lead to depression because they're not sure how to handle the new roles, or reintroduce themselves as a new person that changed quite dramatically when they were in college.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, another thing, are parents who are at home with their kids during this time, and trying to operate and deal with e-learning and Google Learning and all of the different learning platforms that some of their kids are bringing home, and, trying to work as well as trying to navigate how to help their children do the work that they're supposed to still do, even though they're not going to school. So just that anxiety that comes from, how do I navigate being at home, trying to work, trying to manage my kids, dealing with technology that I don't have to deal with so that my kids can continue to learn. So I've heard that quite a bit from a few people. Yeah.
And I think a lot about the elderly that are at home. My mom is a widow, so it can be isolating what you're doing. They're cut off from their community, cut off from your church, and really starting to miss those connections. I see a lot of that happening as well.
I think, people are missing their community. We know church is a place we go every week, and we have relationships, and it's a safe haven for so many of us. So there are lots of us right now missing those people and that community, and there's still a lot of, as you said, older folk who aren't as comfortable with the technology. So although they're trying, it's not as easy for them, and just people are grieving, right? Because there's huge loss beyond loss of life, which is happening consistently every day. There's just loss of what we knew, and loss of what life was, and there's so much loss, thinking about kids again who won't get to graduate, or weddings. One of our colleagues, he did a wedding today right in front of his house with 2 people, people who've been planning weddings for a year. Or funerals. About grief and loss. And one of the things about funerals is it brings so much closure, and it helps, and it's healing in that process. And now you can't even have a funeral where everybody who loved that person can come together. So there's just a lot of grief and a lot of loss right now in our community, in our society.
It's funny when I think about that grief and loss, especially for funerals and services. I think about the families; they won't get that comfort of a hug, of the community, and just what that means, and people surrounding them, that comfort.
And that's huge.
That's really.
So, what do we think about as we're thinking about the different things that are happening, like we've talked about community, church, what other areas, especially as we think about emotional health mental health, our psychological health. What are some of your thoughts on that?
I think, you know, whenever I think about the emotional health, there are a few things that I think about. The first thing is that, especially with people of color, we have the gift of fortitude, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because of history, we've learned how to push through, right? But what I find is that sometimes that can be a dark side or a shadow side to that as well, right? Where sometimes we need to pause and think about our emotional health and be honest and be real with, I'm sad, I'm anxious, I'm depressed. And that is actually a form of courage to say that, right? But because of so much stigma and so much, we've been indoctrinated to believe that we have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. And this is a great time to do that in a sense, but we still need to take care of our emotional health as well. So just having that space to be open with how we are feeling during this time, and being courageous enough to admit that, but also having other individuals available so that we can actually admit that to them and be comforted with that realization of how we're feeling.
Yeah. And to normalize that feeling like you're not the only one, you know,
Right.
to know that other people are experiencing or, you know, struggling and going through that same place. And I think it's in that space of feeling the same and having that commonality that we find comfort. So
Yeah.
it really is okay to say how you're feeling. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with God about how you're feeling, so that, you know, you even have an opportunity to experience the comfort that comes from Him in a time like this.
Yeah. And know that He experienced all of the different emotions that we did, right? When Jesus, you know, when Jesus came on and walked this earth, He experienced all of these things. So He's not unfamiliar with sadness.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I'm thinking about what you're saying, Mary and Roslyn. There's a study called the ACE study. Have you heard about Adverse Childhood Experiences study?
Oh, yeah, the ACEs, yeah.
The ACEs study, and that really, what it basically highlights is that negative adverse experiences, especially in childhood and so on, manifest itself in a lot of the chronic conditions our community have. So diabetes and high blood pressure and all of these other issues that when we don't deal with them and address them, yes, we've built up this resilience that has served us over time, especially throughout slavery and post-slavery and so on. But what has happened in turn is that because we're not dealing with these issues and so on, it's manifesting itself in a lot of the physical, a lot of physical issues we see in our community, right? It's just not that we're eating bad or we're not exercising. It's just not those things, but there are a lot, because the way how God made our body, our mind and our soul and our body are all interconnected. So when we are stressed out, that cortisol is released in our body, and that cortisol starts to shut down different parts of our body. And so if we really understood the ins and outs of how our body and our mind and our soul and our spirit function, we would see how interconnected they are. And so when one part of us isn't doing well, other parts of us won't do well either.
Absolutely. And you bring up a good point that oftentimes we don't, especially as people of color, because we're so used to functioning at such a high level emotionally, that sometimes we don't have a base to go to in terms of saying, this is actually a good, something that felt good and it's a good space for me, because we've always functioned at such a high level. And so what ends up happening, like you said, Shanya, we'll have somatic symptoms.
Right.
But then we'll just try to fix the somatic symptoms, right? I have a headache, my heart's pounding. I don't know why my heart is pounding. I don't know why I'm feeling a certain way, but we're not realizing that's actually connected to your emotional being, right? And we'll just go to the doctor and address that and throw a Band-Aid on it. But the reality is that it's all, you said it's all interconnected, but it may show up differently. And we're so used to not addressing the emotional, kind of like the wound underneath the Band-Aid,
Yeah.
that we'll just try to continue to fix the physical manifestations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when you say that about the wound under the Band-Aid, the whole idea that, you know, that statement of time heals all wounds, and that's not necessarily true, because if you don't clean a wound out, over time, it's going to infect and get worse, you know, and so you do have to really, you do have to acknowledge, you know, and also when we don't acknowledge our emotions or our feelings, you know, we're denying a part of ourselves, you know, that's a very real part of who we are. And so to not, you know, acknowledge how I'm feeling is to not, you know, is to deny an aspect of myself. I'm not taking care of myself, you know, as opposed to owning that, owning how you're feeling, so that then you know what to do with it. You know, if you don't ever own it, then you will never deal with it. And then like anger, for instance, if you don't deal with your anger, you're going to either explode or implode. You explode, that's on somebody else. You implode, that's on your body. Just like Shanya was saying, that's how you see, you know, your body experiencing sickness and things like that, because you're holding all those things in and it's connected. Yeah.
Yeah, and healing is time well spent. In trauma research, when the body experiences trauma, it holds the memory of that pain. And if it continues to go unaddressed, it wears and tears on the body. So it's important for us to create healing spaces so that we can process that, and that the healing can be as pervasive as the sickness or the trauma.
Yeah.
It's amazing how God has created us. I think about we're wonderfully and fearfully made, that the body is that way, you know, that it can hold trauma, but yet also let us know when things are wrong. You know, that's how he's created us, you know.
And this is a trauma for everybody. You know, we can't just dismiss it, or, you know, but this whole episode is just very traumatizing from what we see on television and everything we're hearing, and it's going to touch every single one of us, right? There's this collective grief and trauma in our society, and we really have to acknowledge and own that and deal with it, right? It's when things open back up, we just won't go back to being the way we were before. There's going to be a difference, right? Because we've had this experience now, which has informed us, which has changed us.
Yeah.
I think in trying to get probably our minds around, our lives may be different. They're going to be changed.
Yeah.
When we come out of this,
Yeah.
in just so many ways, you know, we don't even know yet.
Yeah. A new normal.
Yeah, it's forced us to look inward, to be still and know that God is God.
Yeah. And that regardless of what changes, he's our constant. You know, he's the one thing that isn't going to change in the midst of all of this. And when we come out of it, you know, so that's true. Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, we were talking earlier, think about like this is a big detox in our lives. The things that are taken out. It's really interesting. I think just for myself, how I used to spend my Saturdays shopping, wasting time. That's different. That's changed.
Yeah.
A lot of what's happening now is beyond our control, right?
Yeah.
We're not in control. And I mean, of course, we're in control in different aspects of our lives, but us being in our homes and not, you know, not being able to live our normal lives is beyond our control.
And at some point, and this is, you know, what I was saying when we, you know, we were kind of sharing how we're doing. That's something that God spoke to me about, where he reminded me that I'm not in control. And this actually gave me comfort because I could mess some stuff up, you know, you know, and maybe, you know, that's what I was thinking, like maybe at least for me, that's something that God is up to. Do you know what I mean? To say that I got this. I got this. As hard as it is in terms of the sanctification process, he's there and he has this, you know, and that was, you know, that was comforting. There was a time where that was very discouraging and for me, because I had to relinquish that control, but to know that he has it and like you guys said, he's unmoving.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of going back to what Roslyn said about be still and know that I am God. Prior to this period of time, the restriction, my study was on the Sabbath, and so this is really kind of fed into, me learning how to do Sabbath, not just in terms of time, but refocusing, redirecting around various areas of my life and making more room for God in my life,
Mhm.
not, we think about Sabbath as being, oh, Sunday, I don't do anything, but what does Sabbath look like in every aspect of our lives,
Mhm.
And so this is really a time that, I kind of feel like in a way, God's like, hey, you're not going to make room for me. I'll make room for myself, So it feels a little bit like that, but that was what I was focusing on prior to this. So it's kind of helped a lot with that for me.
It was like you had the theory and then you have the practice, the
Absolutely.
practical, right? It's like, okay, you
Absolutely.
studied it. Let's see what happens now,
Yeah. Get a new perspective. Yeah.
So what do you all think about is just kind of expanding out, thinking about our communities and our churches,
Mm-hmm.
families, things that might be going on at home that not necessarily are healthy. If we think about maybe domestic violence or maybe abuse, those things that may be happening are now more intensified. So what do y'all think about that?
Yeah. Well, I've definitely heard that statistically crime is down, in terms of outwardly, but that domestic violence is up, and yeah, where there has been outlets, people have been able to, you know, be busy, preoccupy themselves, escape. Can't do that now, and so, unfortunately, that's a real issue that's taking place now. And so, yeah.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking because people in domestic violence situations, a lot of times they try to escape work and school in different places, So right now where they have to be home, it's been compounded and intensified, and I just want to say for anybody listening to this, we have our domestic violence hotline. If you Google that, in the Chicagoland area, a lot of times even Uber and Lyft has been partnering too with our city, and you can call them and they'll come up with a plan for you if you need help or anything else. I just wanted to get that in there, but generally it's hard, right? We've been trying with some of our students who we would talk to. It's like, okay, well, can you go for walks so that we could talk? Just say, hey, I'm going for a walk, because they can't exactly have this conversation in the middle of their house, So it's just being creative and finding ways to still reach out and share and be there for people who are hurting and who this has compounded their situation.
Yeah.
Just being able to press into communities, kind of like what Shanya was talking about, where they don't have, we're in a space that was forced upon us at a certain extent, right? We pick and choose who we want to be around and who we want to engage with, and a lot of individuals don't have that choice any longer, right? And with children being back at home, whether it's domestic violence or it's abuse or lunches, right? We talk about how the lunches that they had at school were their actual meals that they had for the day, right? So there's a lot of change that's happening that I think that we didn't anticipate, that it's important. And I know we'll talk about this later and things that we can do, but just pressing into community is so important at this time. But it does take some flexibility, and it does take some courage to be able to navigate around the different strategies that you were using before, right? And this is what it is, where we have to use different strategies that we did before. And I do believe that we have it in us.
Yeah.
We have it in us. That's one thing that God has given us. And sometimes we find that we may not have it, but He has given us so much creativity, so much fortitude, so much empowerment, that we do have it in us. But I think now is the time, if not any, that it's time to research that and to search within.
And I would say for people who, because sometimes what I've found is that it's hard for those who are most in need to ask for help, right? Because we live in a community, we live in a society that says to us, you were weak if you're asking for help. What's wrong with you, right? We think we're going to be vulnerable when we're asking others for help. So even though God made us interdependent on each other, right, we pride ourselves in our independence so much that we don't want to ask for help. And so sometimes for us who are doing okay, maybe we should reach out to a friend, reach out to somebody from church who we sit next to, or another church member, call another church member, call somebody, say, hey, or send a text, how you doing? I just want to see how you're doing. How's it going? You know, and get them to tell you how they're really doing. Don't just say, fine, okay, talk to you later, see you, bye. But just for us to be community to each other, right? Not just in created spaces where, okay, we're going to love each other on a Sunday morning, but we have to be intentionally being our neighbors, each other's neighbors, and being intentionally looking out for each other.
Yeah, and that, you know, and I just want to jump in real quick. That's huge in terms of what you, Shanya, when we talk about that, when we reach out in a non-judgmental stance. You know, we reach out and we're not going to come in with a preconceived idea about how they feel and how they should be responding to this, right? And sometimes we can do that where, well, you know, we'll go because we are so indoctrinated into having to be these strong individuals, especially individuals of color. We can go in and we're just like, you got this, you know, you strong with this, you ain't a punk, come on, we've done this, you know. and
That's true.
Sometimes there's space for that. Sometimes there's space for that, but we really have to go in and allow, we those of us, like Shanya said, that are doing well, we have to go in and allow this space for them to not be okay.
Right.
I mean,
Yes.
Yeah, you can just sit, you know, it's hard, based on what you're saying, it's hard for us to sit in pain, right? It's hard for us. We want to fix it.
Right.
That's the reality, right? But it's okay to say, I'm sorry you're going through that right now, just to listen, just to show empathy. That must be really hard. That must be really difficult. Don't try to give advice in a lot of instances. You know, if the person asks for prayer, okay, but don't just try to kind of just stuff it down their throat like the scripture. Okay, well, you know, just read the scriptures and you'll be okay. You know, but just be non-judgmental, show empathy, and just be a listening ear, you know. And yes, it might mean you sitting in their pain with them for a little while.
Yeah. And guess who did that the best? Who did that the best?
Jesus.
Jesus.
Yeah, you know, it is hard to sit with someone and then you do want to fix it, you know, because we're uncomfortable with pain, so we want them to hurry up and get through it. We want people to hurry up and get through pain, and you can't. It takes time, you know.
Sometimes silence is the best, you know, the best friend. You can just sit with someone in silence and just let them sense your presence with them, or if we can't go, but, you know, even on Zoom or however you choose to reach out, it's just letting someone know I'm with you, you know, I don't need to say anything. Sometimes it's just knowing someone is with you, you know, can be helpful. I've experienced that in this time, just sitting with someone and, you know, letting them cry and saying, hey, it's okay. It's okay. You know, I know it's hard, you know, so, yeah.
We've kind of transitioned into just how to cope, you know, during this time. And so we also want to be able to just provide some helpful tools and things that we've used. And so just thinking about this, if you think about maybe just an example from the Bible, what did that look like in coping? I know, Roslyn, we were talking about earlier about the woman at the well.
Yes, the woman at the well, that encounter she had with Jesus is somewhat of a parallel of what we're facing in our times, where we're having to examine ourselves, our context, and God in a whole new light in ways that we had not considered before. And her encounter with Jesus was life-changing. I believe that our encounter with God during this season is also life-changing, and it can lend itself to us living more fully There were some things that the woman at the well left behind in order to pursue Jesus. And I anticipate that we will follow suit with that.
That's good.
So let's talk about some ways to cope. What would you say are some key ones maybe that we've used ourselves, but how we've shared with others, how to cope?
So I would start off by saying, so we're believers, right? And this is where the rubber hits the road. You know, what is really big now is mindfulness and meditation. And I always say, and one of my colleagues, you know, she does a lot of that. And I always say, you know, the Bible that's mentioned in there, that goes back to ancient days. So let's meditate on the word. The Lord is my refuge and my strength, you know. Roslyn mentioned earlier, do not, you know, Philippians 4:13, do not be anxious for anything. Scriptures come to mind, scriptures of comfort, of peace, of knowing God is in control. I think that is one of the biggest coping strategies we can have. It's just that when our mind starts to wander off, when we start to go down this trail of doom and gloom, that we stop it and we remember who we believe, we remember who's in charge. We go back to our faith and be like, okay, God, I know you got this. I go back to, you know, the plague in the Bible. We go back to all the instances in the Bible, things we just read about, you know, and how God dealt with it, and he brought his people through, and he was in control. And so for us to constantly remind ourselves, okay, you know what, Lord, this is in your hands, and nothing I can do can change that. This is up to you. So let me trust you now more than ever.
Yeah. So in keeping with that, I would say that, you know, the word journaling is like a huge something that can bring a lot of comfort. You know, sometimes we're walking around with all of these what ifs and, you know, uncertainties, and we don't even know what we're thinking. We're just feeling angst and anxiety about it. And so sometimes just being able to write down, you know, what you're thinking and what you're feeling, and then taking that next step and doing what you're saying, Shanya, what kinds of thoughts am I having? And does God have anything to say in his word about the kinds of thoughts that I'm having? You know, like the what ifs, you know, the truth is I'm not going to know everything, but I know that he knows everything, you know? And so I can, you know, land that what if with, you know, Isaiah 55, you know, my thoughts are not your thoughts. My ways are higher than your ways. You know, he's in control. He knows everything. And so sometimes it's taking that moment to get out of your head, put it down on paper, externalize it is what we do. Take it out of here and put it out here in front of you so that you can look at it. What am I worried about? What am I feeling? What am I worried about? And does God have something to say about that? You know, and go find that word and then write it down and write 3 or 5 scriptures down on a note card and carry that with you so that when you start finding yourself feeling that way, you can remind yourself of what God has to say about that particular thing. So journaling coupled with meditation of scripture is one of the things that I would suggest.
And this doesn't mean, it doesn't mean that it'll disappear right away, that those thoughts will automatically stop. What it is that you have to retrain our brains, right? We have to retrain our minds, like with anything. Like we just have to constantly repeat it to ourselves and constantly remind ourselves of that. Don't be beat upon yourself like, oh my gosh, I've been praying and repeating the scripture and it's still the thoughts are still coming in my head. Don't beat up on yourself because of that. Know that this is a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And
that's good. Yeah, that's a good reminder, because for those perfectionists out there, that will become an issue.
Roslyn, what about you? What are some coping?
For me, actually, as Shanya was talking about retraining, I've just revisited some habits. And one of my small habits that I've had to revisit is taking my vitamins regularly. So that's very basic, but it's very important as well to energy level, keeping yourself up. maintaining your health day to day in the long run. So it's interesting how even small habits can have huge impact, particularly in crisis. I mean, this is a basic thing, but in crisis, things are intensified. Whatever's lacking or whatever isn't in order is intensified and magnified in times of crisis. So yes, I'm doing better with my vitamins.
Me too, Roslyn.
What about you, Mary? What are you doing?
One thing I do want to say, what Roslyn was saying is, when we talk about journaling, and Shanya was saying when we talk about journaling, one thing that I do want to make clear is, not make clear, but I want to add on to that, is that we can go to God raw and uncut. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes we are stifled and paralyzed because we have to go to him. We feel like we have to go to him with a certain way that we have to talk. If not, that's indicative of our walk, right? We become Job's friends, where it was like, what's wrong with you? How come you don't have joy during this time, right?
Right.
Yeah. We actually can go to him, whether it's through journaling, whether it's through praying, just raw and uncut. I mean, the way that I talk to, when I go into prayer, sometimes I laugh at myself. Like, I know he's laughing at me like, this girl is a trip, because I will go in with this understanding that he can handle it. So when we are journaling, and then when we are being reminded of how good he is, he knows that we have this angst, and he knows that we have all of these doubts, and to go into that prayer or that journaling with this just transparency.
That's
right.
That's a good word. Yeah.
That's a good
Yeah. But I would say, and it's kind of addition to Roslyn, where, routine. I have a 14-year-old, and she wants to sleep until 2:00 in the afternoon. And I am like, get up and brush your teeth, comb your hair, make some breakfast, and go sit at that table. No, you cannot do your homework in your bed. You're going to do it at the table. And that routine really helps. So, somebody made a joke earlier where it's like, sometimes you just got to look a little, brushing your teeth makes you feel a little bit better, right? So give yourself a little bit of routine. So then, because some of the angst comes from lack of control and lack of structure. Lack of structure. And so provide a little bit of structure for yourself. And sometimes we have to shake it up because it feels like Groundhog's Day. But it's really important that, especially if you're dealing with anxiety, is that you find structure, because that can actually be an added anecdote to alleviating a little bit of that anxiety.
But add to that too, I think about that part, just the physical part. We do have to take care of our bodies, and we hold everything. And we think about anxiety, so things like deep breathing, muscle relaxation. I do something with my students before I start class. I'll try a different anxiety reducing technique. So whether that's deep breathing, squeezing muscles and relaxing is one, and also just our health. So eating, exercising, walking. These are the basics. They sound maybe like, it's not like much, but we need to do this. This is what we need to do during this time.
Yeah, and just to add to that, Valencia, and I want people to understand, because you say deep breathing, people are like, oh, whatever. But it actually has this physiological effect on our body. So when we get anxious, right, our body kicks into that adrenaline mode. We know our hearts are beating fast. We're in that fight or flight. Like if you see a car coming at you, I better get out of the way. If not, I'm in danger. And that's our body's way of alerting us. But then we have to try to calm that down. And for some of us, there's some people are stuck in that state, right? Because there's been so much trauma, there's been so much anxiety over the time that you're stuck in that state. And even now with this happening, a lot of us could be stuck in that state. So that deep breathe in, and you can go online, you can find exercises in this, in through the nose and out through the mouth slowly. What that does is it kicks in our parasympathetic nervous system, And that is what calms our body down.
Mhm.
We have to know that it is actually physiologically having an effect on our body. And sometimes what I like to do with the deep breathing is I've gotten into the essential oils. And so like peppermint oil, just inhaling that is really, that's my favorite one. It's just burn, you know, it's very refreshing.
Mhm.
And it is common, you know, so that helps me as well. Just having my essential oil there, or a nice smelling candle, or something that's common. You know?
Yeah.
Mhm.
I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and we were talking about when you're working from home, you know, when you're used to being out of your house and working, and you have to go from one place to the other, that's a time that you get to breathe, transition, and prepare yourself to enter into that next space. But being at home and not having that transition period can make work feel very, you can feel like you're working harder. At least I feel like I'm working harder than I do when I go to the office. But I realize that the transition between my office and the next place I'm going gives me a time to reflect, breathe, transition mentally. So one of the thoughts is that that hour or that 30 minutes or whatever it would take for me to get from one space to the other, can I step away from what I'm doing while I'm working as if I were getting on the train or getting on a bus to go to the next place, and give myself that little bit of a break so that I'm not constantly going, and then it feels like I'm working 2 times harder than I do when I'm out of the house. So just taking those breaks in between to just breathe and give yourself a time of just coming down before you keep going forward, you know. So
I was thinking too with that, the set a time when your day starts and when your day ends. You know,
Yes.
like at 5 o'clock, I'm gonna close this computer,
Yeah.
and that's the end of the day. You know.
Yeah.
Even just to go with that, when we talk about self-care, it's that idea of, you know, and it's kind of going and going and going. And especially as Christians, oftentimes we'll just keep going and going and going, and we're doing it for others, which is a beautiful thing. It is part of the gospel, right? That we are to do for others. But we tend to substitute ministry for spirituality, right? Where we tend to think that we are we're taking care of ourselves when we are doing for others.
Right.
And in reality, you know, Mark 1:35, and it's talk about when Jesus went to, you know, when he healed Peter's mother-in-law, and then he went and snuck out later and said, okay, I'm going to go pray. But then he came back and everyone said, okay, you have a bunch of people that you need to pray for. But Jesus said, no, I'm going to go. But the point in the whole story was that he actually took time for himself. So so he was able to minister to others. Right. And sometimes we always think of tools sometimes as doing, and sometimes that tool is to say, let me check in with myself and how I'm doing, so that I then can be equipped to help other people.
Right. That's good. That's good. Yeah.
It's kind of like how we came up with the name for this panel, Fill My Cup, right? You know, just if we can't pour from an empty glass.
That's right.
If the glass is empty, we can't share it, right? And as women of color, as men of color, as parents, as leaders, people doing ministry, we pour sometimes, and we don't refill ourselves.
Yeah.
Because we just get used to doing that, and we think that's okay. But really and truly, we're running on fumes, and that's not good either.
Right.
Right? We really have to, and it's not selfish. It is not, you know, we think that, oh, it's being so selfish, but it's not that we're being selfish. But if you take time to invest in yourself and take care of yourself, then you will have more to give to others, right? If I take time to fill up my glass, I can share it with my 2 boys and with my family. But if I have an empty glass, they're not getting much. You know?
Let's talk a little bit more about along that line about connection. What does that look like? First, connecting with others, community. It looks different right now in this time, but
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I would think that, I always wanted to rename this to physical distancing rather than social distancing.
Yes.
Mary, I did. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
Because it's like, we still can be together.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In all of this, and we still can connect in all of this.
Yes.
And then, but also be very cognizant of how we're connecting, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I know some people may be struggling with is that they're connecting to people that were toxic because that's who they're closest to in proximity at this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that we have to think about in terms of connecting. One of you guys said this earlier of, can you go out and maybe take a walk and then connect with someone that's actually helping filling your cup, right?
Right.
And how do we connect with them in that way? But so it's not just connecting with individuals so that they can actually work towards healing during this unprecedented time, but also being strategic and intentional about people who are actually wanting to fill your cup, and that's available to be and caring for you, rather than just connecting with anyone, because that then can re-traumatize some people, right? Being intentional and cognizant of who in my life is available to go to co-journey with me in a way that's healing for both of us.
Yeah, I had a chance on Easter Sunday with two friends going a social distancing, physical distancing walk. And I realized I hadn't really seen anybody for about a month. And so being out with my friends, and then also just interacting with people as we were walking around the park, people were so friendly. They were speaking. They're like, "Good morning, happy Easter," and everybody was smiling. And it was interesting that people were glad to see other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it was refreshing and energizing.
Yeah. I on Easter I did a drive-by. I had a friend who's kind of by herself on Easter, and so I said, "Hey, I'm just gonna get my car, drive over there, and we'll just talk from a distance." And so that's what we did. And she said, "Hey, thank you so much for being willing to do that." So yeah.
I find, we're finding new and creative ways. One of the things that I've been able to do, so I would usually tell people the only time I have to talk on the phone is usually in my commute home or to work, because otherwise it's hard with two kids running around and so on. But I've actually been finding time for more phone calls recently. And a lot of times we're so busy, we don't have time for phone calls, but the time to actually be on the phone with somebody and have a real conversation, there's been more time for that.
Yeah.
And so we shouldn't isolate, right, Valencia? Like
No
for
isolation.
those who are alone,
No.
it's tempting. It is super tempting to isolate, especially if you're feeling down and so on. And if you know you're prone to that, have a friend check in on you, calling you, accountability, have somebody who that you can trust and who is there for you. Because it's easy to isolate. It is easy in this time to kind of just push off and go be by yourself, but don't do that.
Yeah.
And it's important to realize too that in addition to that, Shanya, where if we don't have someone in our lives, because I think sometimes we take advantage that we have someone in our lives. Shanya, you put something, you gave some information earlier in terms of individuals that can receive resources, but there are resources out there. I know that Taraji Henson, the actress, she's giving, I think, like free
5 free virtual sessions.
Yes, 5 free virtual sessions for the African American community, right? So just Google it, because I can't remember the name.
Like for counseling,
for counseling. Yeah.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow,
Okay.
that's cool resource. She's not doing the counseling though, right?
No.
She's a counselor.
She's a jack of all trades.
I was thinking you were saying acting classes. I was going to say, oh, that's interesting. Yeah.
That creative piece is going on.
Right? Yeah.
But some of us don't have that other that can be available for us, and there are people that are, the one thing about this whole thing that is beautiful, there are a lot of things that are very hard to grasp that we are still trying to adjust, but people are, you know, it's kind of, and I believe that this is God. He's rebooting us and showing us how to reach out and connect to other people in that humanness. And so there are so many different resources out there that if you don't have someone to talk to, they are giving free telehealth services, especially for Taraji, specifically for African Americans. So that is huge for us, right? And I mean, it can be anonymous. Sometimes you don't want to relate to your family or people that maybe have hurt you in the past. So with that, when you are reaching out with your social, being intentional, being social, if you don't have that other that you are safe with, there are people out there that you can connect with.
Yeah, and NAMI has a lot of good resources. NAMI, National Association of Mental Illness. And I was trying to find out, our governor here in Illinois, there's just a hotline that came out. If you're having any mental health issues or concerns, there's a number you can text to or a number you can call them. I'll try to find it before we get off, but that is also another resource.
And Liberated is a meditation resource. We talked about meditation. It's called Liberated, and it's specifically for African Americans.
Okay, good resources. So, ladies, we're going to start to wind down here. And just as we end, I wonder, could we just go around, just kind of check out, say how we are, how we're feeling. And then I'm going to ask Roslyn Bates to close us in prayer. Also, just want to say that we're going to do this again in about 2 weeks because there's some other issues and topics we want to talk about. So watch for us.
Yeah.
So, Roslyn, Jordan, what do you want to say? Checking out.
Oh, let's see. Well, it's been a great hour to be with you all. I mean, this is a joy and a gem for us just to be able to connect as mental health professionals, right? And check in on each other because we need it as much as anyone else. And just to be able to offer some insights to help others has been really good. You know, I feel like it's our way of being able to help in a time like this. So, yeah.
Thank you. Mrs. Gray.
Hi. So I did find, so you can text talk to 552-020, 552-020 if you need help. But I just want to say, don't be hard on yourself, okay? It's okay if you can't get everything accomplished. It's okay that, you know, we're trying to be ambitious and, oh, I should use this time to do all these things I've been planning to do for years and months or whatever. No. It's okay to just be still, right? Yeah. Roslyn talked about the Sabbath, and sometimes we don't know how to do that, and God forces us to do that. And so for those of us who like to get a lot accomplished, it's okay if we don't right now, all right? Go easy on yourself. Sometimes we are our harshest critics. So give yourself a break. It's okay.
All right, thank you. Dr. Hendrickson.
So I wanted to provide the foundation that Taraji started. So you would text no stigma to 707070. And so that's the information that you can reach out to her. And I don't know how it goes, but I know that she said, I think it was Roslyn Bates, I think, right? She said like five sessions. So text no stigma, NOSTIGMA to 707070. And that is like I said before, is specifically for African Americans. So I would assume that they will have somebody available that can identify with your our unique struggles. But my last one, I guess, it kind of just echoes the rest of the ladies. One, I thank you, ladies, for being part of this and showing and giving and being so selfless in this. But yeah, I just hope you know that we are able to take off our capes during this time and kind of what Shanya said, and be okay with not being okay at this time, but know that we do have someone, we have a Savior that is he knows, right, and he can handle that.
Yeah.
And I'd just like to say, before I give it over to Roslyn to close us out, I would just say, take each day as you wake up today. This is all you have to do is today.
Yeah.
It's hard to look down the road. You're thinking, well, when is this shelter place going to end? And it's going on. But you know what? Just stay present in today, the day that the Lord has given us.
Yeah.
And Roslyn, I give it to you to close out and share what you want to share.
Sure. Well, we would also want to thank our audience for joining us, and we look forward to journeying more with you and chatting through some other topics coming soon. We're grateful for this opportunity to offer our experience, share a piece of our lives and our profession with a broader audience. So we're looking forward to more. We're grateful. Thank you for joining us, all you out there. So let's close in prayer. God, we thank you for this time that you have given to us to connect, and for this time of examination, renewal, revisiting, recalibrating. God, we ask, Lord, for your continued grace upon us in this crisis. We recognize that we are not alone, but you are with us and you are for us. We ask, Lord God, that as we proceed from here, that you would strengthen us, that you would grant us your peace, and remind us that we belong to you. We give you thanks and praise. In Jesus' name, amen.
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 Thank you, ladies. And we're signing off in 3, 2, 1.